Joel Osteen was a man who never envisioned himself as a preacher. In his younger days, he was more at home behind a camera, engrossed in the world of television production. He found fulfillment in the collaboration, the creativity, the ability to craft a narrative and captivate an audience. But life had other plans. Following his father's sudden death, he found himself at the helm of a lucrative ministry. It was a daunting responsibility, one that he embraced with a sense of duty rather than desire. As he navigated the labyrinth of sermons, scriptures, and spiritual guidance, there was a gnawing realization that he was not living the life he had once envisioned for himself. Yet, he soldiered on, driven by a sense of obligation and a desire to honor his father's legacy. But beneath the happy facade, a storm was brewing. As we delve deeper into the day, Joel Osteen lost his cool. It's important to remember the path that led him here, a path paved with ostensibly good intentions, but marred by an internal struggle that few could see. On a quiet Good Friday, the renowned preacher Joel Osteen found himself in an unfamiliar struggle. In the solitude of his study, surrounded by the typical smell of both new and old books and the soft glow of his desk lamp, he sat down to craft his Easter sermon. This was a task he had performed with ease many times before, but he wondered if he should try something different this time. His fingers hovered over the worn pages of a Bible, a book he knew a lot about, yet one he had to admit, at least to himself, he wasn't intimately familiar with. Today, he found the words that usually flowed effortlessly seemed to elude him. His mind was clouded, his thoughts scattered. The frustration was palpable, the silence in the room punctuated only by the occasional sigh of despair. As he grappled with his unexplained inability to find the right words, Joel contemplated taking a vacation, hoping it might help him regain his clarity and composure. He envisioned himself in a fun and carefree setting, away from the demands of his congregation. But as the thought crossed his mind, he also felt a pang of resentment. After all, he was a spiritual leader, and his flock looked up to him for constant guidance and support. As the day wore on, his frustration gradually morphed into a deep sense of unease. A feeling of impending dread seemed to hang in the air, casting a dark shadow over the room. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey that would not only test his resilience, but also reveal a side of himself that few had seen before. Brace yourselves, because Joel Osteen, the man who traded his passion for a pulpit, was angry. Yes, you heard it right. A man celebrated for his upbeat demeanor and compelling charisma, Joel was engulfed by a depressive darkness unlike anything he'd faced before. As Easter Sunday loomed, he spiraled deeper into a psychological abyss on Good Friday. This was a strange and daunting mental labyrinth he had never tread before. He noticed as he wrote that the grip of emotional distress gradually permeated his words, tinging them with an unmistakable melancholy. The vitality associated with Joel's persona seemed to fade away. He became a man locked in a grueling battle with his inner demons, his emotions shackling him, brimming over in a futile attempt to craft an adequate sermon. This glaring contradiction to his familiar calm confidence revealed a side of him that would shock all, creating ripples of confusion. In an attempt to quell this internal storm, Joel turned to his loved ones. His wife, Victoria, failed to understand his ordeal. Instead of lending a comforting ear, she urged him to never compromise his public persona, no matter how he feels. She reminded him of the many who depended on his livelihood. This insensitivity stoked his frustration further, leading to a growing sense of isolation. Seeking consolation, he found compassion in his mother as she continued to mourn the loss of her husband. She expressed to Joel that his father could have provided the support he needed. This painful realization of the paternal void in his life only intensified Joel's emotional struggle, amplifying his sadness and rising fury. Joel's sudden plague of negative emotions had the capacity to shatter the long-standing image of religious leaders as near-perfect, stable, and stoic figures. He was well aware people don't really want or expect them to be vulnerable to life's pressures, frustrations, and inner battles. How is that fair? Is that even achievable? Do they want to set me up for emotional breakdown? Joel's internal questioning received no discernible answer. In the build-up to his unprecedented emotional upheaval, Joel Osteen, who had reluctantly stepped into his father's shoes, sought solace in the wisdom of his peers. Who could understand his predicament better than his fellow televangelists? These were individuals who, like Joel, navigated the stormy waters of relentless public scrutiny and towering expectations. Reaching out to them for guidance, Joel found himself surrounded by respected figures, each with their distinctive views on happiness, prosperity, and the art of preaching. Their advice resonated with a simple message: stage a grand show at your church, allow the church staff to manage the details, schedule an extravagant getaway. That's how we found our joy, avoided burnout, and maintained our success. Although their words were couched in the knowledge gained by decades of experience, they conveyed a potentially sinister message that bewildered Joel. To stage a spectacle instead of a sermon for Easter was a stark detour from the personal touch his audience seemed to prefer. The implications of this advice were significant. It occurred to him they might wish for Joel to gradually corrode his dedication to his image. Also, he got a sense they were belittling his emotional crisis by suggesting a luxurious holiday would fix him, even though he himself had already considered it possible. An opportunity to revitalize and declutter his thoughts did spark a small ray of hope, however. Maybe he did just need a rest from his mounting pressures. This proposition, that his problems could be eased with a lavish holiday, started to appear less dismissive the more he thought about it. And the advice about an Easter program offered a fresh perspective to Joel's burdened mind. It delineated a path to success that prioritized grandeur over any attempt at depth, which had seemed to serve his fellow televangelists well. As we delve further into this narrative, it becomes evident that Joel's struggle is more intricate than it appears on the surface. It isn't merely about living up to high expectations. It's about harmonizing his personal conflicts with the pressures of his public persona, while under a public scrutiny he never intended to endure. Now, it's important to remember that anger, in and of itself, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Especially for someone like Joel Osteen, who had been suppressing his true desires for years. This natural human emotion is a reaction to perceived threats or injustices. However, when it's expressed in inappropriate or harmful ways, that's when it becomes a problem. When something unfortunate does happen, it provides us all with an opportunity to reflect, to consider the expectations we place on our religious leaders, to think about who we elevate to those positions and why, and to ponder what it means to be a spiritual leader in a world that is so complex and challenging. Just when things couldn't get any worse, Joel found himself in a situation that threatened his reputation as a preacher. The events unfolded in a parking lot, a setting far from what one would expect for a preacher's downfall. A disagreement over a parking space rapidly grew, and Joel, typically a symbol of positive thinking and friendliness, was surprisingly on the cusp of a physical confrontation. An onlooker recorded the incident on their iPhone. This wasn't the poised, comforting voice millions listened to every week. Here was a man, furious and exasperated, ensnared in a moment of vulnerability. The video rapidly made its way onto the internet, spreading like a spark in a parched forest. The image of the gentle, composed preacher was now under increased scrutiny. The backlash was instantaneous. Opinions poured in, some in defense of Joel, others in sharp criticism. His congregation and followers across the nation stood divided, his reputation on the line. As the video disseminated like an unstoppable fire, Joel was left to confront the aftermath of his actions. The dust had barely even begun to settle on the viral video controversy as Joel Osteen prepared for his next on-stage appearance. But this was no ordinary Sunday. It was Easter Sunday, a day of resurrection and renewal. Deep in thought, Joel stood backstage, his heart pounding with anticipation and a strange sense of liberation. He had decided to use his uncharacteristic outburst as his way out. As he took the stage at his megachurch, it wasn't with his usual veneer of humility and grace. Instead, there was an air of defiance, a spark of arrogance. The crowd, unaware of the turbulence within Joel, waited with bated breath. Their anticipation was palpable, filling the room like a dense fog. In a shocking revelation, Joel confessed to his congregation that he could no longer be a pastor. He spoke of his uncertainty, his doubts about his faith, and the strain of living a life he hadn't initially chosen and had never fully embraced. The room fell into an eerie silence, the words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. The man they had come to see as a symbol of faith and positivity was now a figure of uncertainty and doubt. As the crowd sat in stunned silence, Joel began to walk off the stage, then turned back to face the congregation for one final time. "This is my life," Joel told the crowd. "I am what I say I am. I have what I want to have, and I can do what I say I can do. Get someone else to teach you the word of God." Joel was upset. It had taken him this long to remove his mask. He would no longer waste time with inauthenticity. "My best life is now," Joel muttered to himself as he left the stage. "Time for me to live it."